Alrighty, I have grabbed the Mic Pod, the MC-POD, to do a quick test and comparison between the Mic Pod and the Podmic. First thing I noticed when I pulled out the Mic Pod is the hollowness, the feeling of hollow build, if I could put it that way. It feels very poor in comparison to the Podmic, which feels like a chunk of steel. If the build quality matters to you and you want something that feels as though you could use it for the next 150 years while beating people to death with it, then go with the Podmic. If manufacturing location matters to you, Podmic is made in Australia, Mic Pod is made in China. Let me just go ahead and keep talking into the Mic Pod. Go around 90 degrees, hear that off-axis rejection and coloration, and then we will go around to the rear of the Mic Pod, and here is how that sounds. The last thing I will do is put a little bit of wind and air and plosive into the Mic Pod. Mic Pod, pod. There you go. All right, now we are on the Rode Podmic, and I am at the same-ish distance, at the same gain setting. This is speaking into the front of it. Let me go around 90 degrees. Here's the off-axis rejection and coloration. Then at 180 degrees, here's the rear of the Rode Podmic. Very, very cool. I am feeling fine this morning. I'm not grumpy at all. I'm really not grumpy. I sound grumpy, though. But Podmic. It still does allow gusts of air in, but it doesn't sound as bad as the Polsen. Also, as I mentioned, the build quality of the Podmic feels much, much better. You do hear that? I can't find the note, but there's a note there. There's a tiny bit of resonance. But it's not as hollow as the Polsen. Doesn't feel as hollow. Okay, I guess I'll go stop recording, I'll listen back to this, and then I'll share my opinion. And with that test out of the way, let me start by saying my opinion does not matter here that much, because I am not the one buying the microphone for use on my channel. You are the one buying the microphone for use on your channel, so your opinion matters the most. If you think the Polsen Mic Pod is the better sounding microphone, that's the route you should go. But because you did ask for my opinion, I will share it with you. Before I even listen to the microphones, I have a very big bias on manufacturing location because I don't like behaviors that occur in certain countries. So I would, right off the bat, be leaning towards the Rode Podmic because it's made in Australia versus being made in China. And this is not me disparaging companies that make their gear in China. I know plenty of companies have very high quality factories and treat their employees incredibly well. But I have a bias towards items that are not made in China. But beside that, if you ignore that bias, in terms of background noise, I thought I heard the Rode Podmic do a slightly better job at 180 degrees. If that's something that you're worried about, Rode Podmic won. Then as far as sound, just general tone, I do prefer the Rode Podmic over the Polsen. And the Polsen is more full in the low end, it's more robust, it's heavier sounding. But then you get to the mids, and the mids on the Polsen are closed off and claustrophobic and artificial sounding. The Rode Podmic doesn't have that as much. The Rode is much more natural sounding in the midsection, not as closed off. And the top end on both of them, not the same, but they're both not the smoothest top sections. They don't have the most pleasing top ends on them. But between the two, I would probably lean towards the Podmic. And I think that was all that you asked, the sound and the background noise rejection. Yeah, I thought the Podmic did better at plosive rejection, better in terms of resonance, better build quality, better manufacturing location, in my personal biased opinion there. And yeah, there you go. That's my opinion. But you have to be the one who makes the final decision.